Welcome to this week's episode of Jonathan on Money. This is episode number 170. So we're getting ready to send my daughter off to sleepaway camp this summer. It's her first time, and to say the process of camp preparation has been enlightening is the understatement of the century. Granted, I don't do most of the work, but the number of weeks it has taken and the myriad of items that has been purchased has been totally insane. As insane as our experience has been, there are many people that go totally overboard. One person even asked me recently if $5,000 is too much to spend on sleepaway camp preparation. So I attended sleepaway camp more than 2 decades ago, and my memories of packing are remarkably simple. I brought enough snacks to last until visiting day, obviously, when we would then make another trip to Walmart, along with a hockey stick and a few basketball jerseys and whatever other clothing my mother packed from the camp packing checklist. That was essentially it. Even after adjusting for inflation, I doubt my parents spent anything close to the amounts some families spend today preparing a child for 2 months away from home. So my initial reaction is that a $5,000 camp preparation budget sounds quite high. Of course, my experience years ago was that of a relatively low maintenance male camper. Expectations have certainly changed, packing lists may have grown, and there's often real social pressure surrounding what children bring with them, unfortunately. So here are my honest thoughts when hearing this type of question. For many middle and upper income families, outfitting a first-time camper typically runs between $1,500 to $3,500, and that's before tuition. That includes trunks, bedding, clothing, shoes, toiletries, towels, sports gear, and all the little extras that add up. In some communities, especially where certain brands have become the unofficial standard, families can easily approach $5,000. The question isn't whether the number is normal. The question is whether it makes financial sense for your family. A better framework is to look at each purchase by purpose. Some items are true necessities because they're on the camp's required packing list, and others improve comfort or convenience but aren't essential. And then there are the pure luxury items, designer clothing, premium luggage, duplicate outfits that add costs without adding meaningful value. If most of your spending falls into the first two categories and fits comfortably within your budget, you're fine. But if you're buying because you're worried your child won't fit in, that's a sign that should give you pause and you may need to reconsider what values you're looking to pass on to your kids. Affordability is the real benchmark here though. A big camp prep budget is reasonable if it represents a small portion of your discretionary income and doesn't interfere with emergency savings, retirement, or college planning. But if you're carrying credit card balances, dipping into your savings that can't easily be replaced, or delaying long-term goals, the spending is too high, no matter what other parents are doing. Remember, the first summer is always the most expensive. You're buying everything from scratch. In future years, you're mostly replacing worn out or outgrown items. That makes durable purchases like a well-made trunk or sleeping bag worth the upfront cost. Trendy sweatshirts and expensive accessories, they rarely last and rarely matter. There's also the hidden cost of camp culture. Many camps develop an unofficial expectation around brands and gear, which I mentioned. Even if no one says it out loud, parents feel pressure to keep up. Before you buy another item, ask, does my child truly need this? Or am I worried about appearances? That question matters financially, but it also shapes the lessons your child learns about money and priorities and values. And don't forget opportunity cost. $5,000 invested at a 7% return could grow to $38,000 over 30 years. That doesn't mean camp prep is a bad decision. It just puts the trade-offs in perspective. Maybe that same money could fund a family vacation, contribute to college savings, or create more flexibility later in the year. The bottom line is this. Camp is an incredible experience. It builds independence, resilience, and lifelong friendships. However, every family must decide what values they want to pass on, and those values are reflected in how they spend. The most useful financial benchmark is not what other parents buy, it's whether the expense fits comfortably within your plan, supports your long-term goals, and reinforces the priorities you want your children to carry on long after the summer ends. In other news, don't forget to buy my book, D's for Diversification, the ABCs of Personal Finance, which is now available on Amazon and jonathanonmoney.com. And buying this book is a wonderful way to support this podcast. And finally, before jumping into this week's episode, I'd like to share that my upcoming live fall webinar series will be released in a few weeks. If you or a friend would like to be notified of my upcoming series, you can either go to parkbridgewealth.com/webinars and register to be on my webinar distribution list, or email me directly with the word webinar in the subject line to be added to the list. Okay, now for today's agenda. My talking points this week are going to discuss, are prenuptial agreements necessary when a couple has disparate levels of wealth? Our quote this week is from Jason Zweig on Chasing Performance. I'll spend the last half of the episode answering listeners' questions, including, can I get the trustee removed for low returns? And finally, we'll end with an actual idea to implement your investing life, where we'll discuss the brand new Trump accounts. And with that, let's jump into this week's talking points. So I received the following question recently, and I feel like this is a situation that many from families face, and the question went as follows. I recently attended a wedding where the bride and groom came from two very different financial backgrounds. One family possessed significant wealth, while the other had relatively modest financial means. Celebrating the joining of these two families made me reflect on an important question. When two people from very different levels of wealth get married, is a prenuptial agreement necessary? So this is not a simple question, and the answer is rarely one size fits all. Every situation depends on a variety of factors, including the age of the couple, the level of family wealth, the dynamics between families, the couple's career paths, and their long-term plans. While there's no universal rule, there are several guiding principles that families may find helpful when thinking through this issue. But first, what is a prenup? To begin with, it is worth understanding what a prenuptial agreement actually is. A prenuptial agreement, commonly referred to as a prenup, is a written, legally binding contract that couples sign before marriage. The document outlines how assets, debts, and financial responsibilities will be handled if the marriage ends through divorce. A prenup typically clarifies what property will remain separate, how marital property may be divided, and whether spousal support will be paid. Prenuptial agreements can also address issues such as inheritance, family businesses, and premarital debt. However, there are limits to what they can control. For example, a prenup cannot determine child custody or child support arrangements. For the agreement to be legally valid, both parties must enter into it voluntarily, disclose their financial information fully, and sign the document in a formal manner, typically with notarization. Each partner should ideally have their own attorney ensure the agreement is fair and properly structured. Many couples choose to sign a prenup for a variety of reasons. Some want to protect significant premarital assets, others want to ensure that family wealth remains within the family, and some wish to protect themselves from a partner's existing debts. In other cases, the agreement simply encourages open communication about financial expectations before the marriage begins. Importantly, any such agreement should be drafted well in advance of the wedding to avoid unnecessary pressure or emotional tension during an already stressful time. Now let's discuss a halachic prenup. Within the frum community, there is also an important distinction between a financial prenup and what is known as a halachic prenup. A halachic prenup is a rabbinically endorsed legal agreement designed to prevent situations in which a woman becomes an aguna or chained to a dead marriage and unable to remarry because her husband refuses to grant a get, which is a Jewish bill of divorce. This document creates financial incentives that strongly discourage withholding of a get, and it has become one of the most effective modern tools for preventing abuse within Jewish divorce proceedings. Today, it is widely viewed as essential by rabbinic authorities across much of the Orthodox world, and in my opinion, every couple entering into marriage should sign a halachic prenup regardless of their level of religious observance, background, or financial status. It serves as an important safeguard that protects both parties and helps prevent painful situations that can arise later. Returning to the financial question of a financial prenup for couples with disparate levels of wealth, the situation becomes more complicated when two individuals come from dramatically different levels of wealth. When one family possesses significant financial assets and other does not, a financial prenup can sometimes make practical sense. For example, a family with substantial wealth may wish to ensure that certain assets, such as inherited properties, family businesses, or long-standing investment portfolios, remain separate from the marital estate. Without such protection, those assets could potentially become part of a divorce negotiation in the future. In these situations, A carefully constructed prenuptial agreement may provide clarity and protection for both the individual and the family. However, it is equally important to recognize that a prenup should not exist solely to protect the wealthier spouse. The spouse entering the marriage with fewer assets may also have legitimate concerns that deserve attention. Consider a situation in which the less wealthy spouse leaves the workforce or reduces their career ambitions because the couple relies on family wealth or support. If the marriage later ends or after many years, that spouse may face significant financial challenges rebuilding their career and supporting themselves. A thoughtfully constructed prenuptial agreement can address this imbalance by ensuring that the financial independent spouse receives a fair level of protection. In other words, a prenup can function as a tool that protects both sides rather than serving as purely defensive measure for the wealthier family. When structured properly, it can offer financial breathing room and stability to a spouse whose life circumstances may have changed dramatically due to the marriage. It's also worth discussing when a financial prenup may not be needed. By contrast, the necessity for a financial prenup tends to be much lower when a couple begins marriage on relatively equal financial footing. When both individuals are early in their careers, possess limited assets, and are building their financial lives together, the philosophy of what's yours is mine and what's mine is yours often makes the most sense. In those situations, there may simply be fewer assets that require special protection. The key with all this is to get it done correctly. Regardless of the circumstances, couples considering a financial prenuptial agreement should always consult experienced legal professionals. An attorney who specializes in matrimonial law or asset protection can help ensure that the agreement is fair, enforceable, and tailored to the couple's unique situation. When handled thoughtfully and professionally, these discussions do not need to create tension or jeopardize shidduch. Ideally, everyone involved can approach the topic with maturity and clarity, recognizing that the goal is not to undermine the marriage, but to establish a framework that protects both parties. While discussions about prenuptial agreements can feel uncomfortable, they often reflect responsible financial planning rather than a lack of trust. At the end of the day, the goal of any couple is to embark on a happy and enduring marriage. Taking precautionary measures along the way can simply be part of a prudent planning process. There's also another point that deserves serious attention when discussing marriage and financial security, and in many cases, it may be even more important than a prenup itself. Both spouses should ideally develop the education, the training, and professional skills necessary to earn a livable wage. Over the past several years, I've received numerous phone calls from women who found themselves in financially, emotionally abusive marriages. Many of these women spent years relying on their husbands as the primary financial provider while they remained out of the workforce raising children. When the marriage ultimately broke down, they suddenly faced the daunting challenge of supporting themselves and their families without having a decent work history or marketable professional skills. Unfortunately, if someone has been out of the workforce for many years, developing a career in their 40s while caring for several children can be extraordinarily challenging. In some of these cases, the husband became extremely difficult during the divorce process by delaying payments, withholding financial support, or negotiating aggressively in order to provide as little as possible to his former spouse and children. A divorce settlement can be negotiated, delayed, or disputed, but no one can take away someone's skills, training, or ability to earn a living. The ability to generate income provides independence, dignity, and financial security regardless of what may happen in the marriage. For this reason, I often advise families, especially those raising daughters, that it is essential for every young person to acquire a skill set that allows them to earn a livable wage, whether that skill comes through higher education, professional certification, or vocational training. It creates a foundation of financial resilience. Having the ability to support oneself financially changes that dynamic entirely. Even if a former spouse becomes difficult or unreliable, a person who can still pay their bills and support their family can move forward with confidence. While a prenup can help define financial boundaries, education and professional skills provide something far more powerful, long-term financial independence. Ultimately, Every marriage is unique, and families must evaluate their own circumstances carefully when deciding whether a financial prenuptial agreement makes sense. The goal of marriage is to build a life together based on trust, partnership, and shared values. However, taking thoughtful steps to protect one another financially and emotionally can help lay the foundation for a strong and enduring union. Okay, those are the talking points this week. And as a reminder, you can be notified of all my recent articles, webinars, and all the work I put out by subscribing to my free monthly newsletter at parkbridgewealth.com/newsletter. This week's quote is from Jason Zweig. For those who don't know, Jason Zweig is a longtime personal finance columnist for the Wall Street Journal and one of the most influential voices in investor behavior. He focuses on how psychology, emotions, and cognitive biases shape financial decisions, often warning readers about performance chasing, overconfidence, and market hype. And I've referenced Zweig before in my writing and speaking. Zweig recently wrote in an article, "Investors keep chasing performance, but they never seem to catch it." This is a simple sentence, but it explains billions of dollars in lost returns. Here's the problem. When an investment looks great on paper, maybe it's up 15% over the past few years, annualized, most people assume that strength will continue. That's the recency illusion. Our brains are wired to believe the recent past is the future. Add in social proof, where it feels safer to lose money with the crowd than stand alone, and confirmation bias, where we selectively read headlines that justify buying whatever is already hot, you get a perfect storm. The result is predictable in this scenario. Investors pile into a fund or an investment after it has already run up in value. But markets naturally regress to the mean. The smart money that bought early is often selling right as the latecomers rush in. So even though the fund may have earned 15% annually, the average investor earns far less because they bought high and eventually panic and sell low. Zweig points out that performance chasing is not just a bad habit, it's self-defeating cycle. The more you chase, the further behind you will fall. Okay, now let's jump to this week's financial questions. And if you do have a question, feel free to submit it to me, and it may be answered in a future episode. Okay, first question. I have a trustee overseeing a trust that I'm the beneficiary of. They charge a ton of money and do nothing. Also, I think my trust money has been mismanaged because my returns are too low. Can I get the trustee removed for low returns? So your trustee may suck, but it is extremely unlikely that you can get them removed for not achieving returns that you deem to be unacceptable. Returns can always be rationalized based on a variety of factors, the most important of which may be parameters outlined in the trust document that can be interpreted in a multitude of different ways. Therefore, making a compelling argument to remove the trustee based on returns alone may not be sufficient. Furthermore, your expectations of what returns are acceptable may not be in line with reality. I don't know enough about your expectations or your background financial situation, but oftentimes notice investors, most people, to be frank, are unrealistic with their performance expectations and don't understand the correct portfolio that is needed to achieve their goals. I have experienced many trustees who do suck for a variety of reasons. They typically charge an arm and a leg and provide no other function other than taking their fee and making disbursements when they need to. However, if you want to remove a trustee, you're going to have to, one, prove that they are doing something illegal, two, they are doing something unethical, or three, you will need, and three, I should say, you will need to hire a competent attorney to get them involved, which will be very, very, very costly. You will need to figure out if all that is worth it to try to remove the trustee. One way around this whole hassle of for folks who are setting up a trust today, not one that has already been set up, is to have what's called a trust protector provision, which appoints a trusted person who may not be able to make changes inside the trust, but has the power to fire trustees if they are deemed incompetent. It's worth considering this provision with your attorney to avoid having a bad trustee, which is common and costly. Okay, next question. Is an UTMA account a tax advantage account? Some people told me it is, but others say it is not. No, it's not a tax advantage account in the traditional sense. When people typically think about the typical tax advantage accounts, they think about either getting a tax deduction when putting it in, allowing the money to go tax deferred, and or taking the money out tax free. Good examples of these are IRAs, 401ks, 529s, HSAs, and others. An UMA account provides none of these advantages. The only perceived tax benefit is if you generate a very modest amount of income, you, i.e., really the child, does not pay tax on that money. It's below $1,350 this year. This is a minuscule benefit, and incentivizing an investor to not make money is not the same as actual tax advantage account like the ones I just mentioned. Once the account grows to a certain size and generates a certain threshold of income, $2,700 this year, the child is taxed at the more onerous parents' rate. I still use UTMA accounts myself and recommend them to my clients when appropriate. Not every account needs to have tax advantages. Some are just helpful for planning purposes. However, to label an UTMA account as a tax advantage account is very misleading. Next question. I'm concentrated in tech stocks, but the big drop in the NASDAQ several months ago actually made me question my allocation since I'm 67 and will retire in a few years. When do you recommend I start diversifying into what and how do taxes play into it? You are correct to question your allocation. It never makes sense to be so concentrated in one area of the market. Remember, successful investing is not about taking big risks to achieve big returns. That will likely not work out. For the overwhelming majority of investors, taking modest risk and hitting singles and doubles with a certain level of consistency is all you need to achieve your goals and amass a vast sum of wealth. In terms of what you should do, I'd recommend a multi-pronged approach. One, sell some of your NASDAQ holdings. Yes, this will mean paying taxes, presumably at the more favorable capital gains rate, though. But that's a good thing. You made a lot of money. Lock in the gains and reposition your portfolio to something that is more in line for a soon-to-be retiree. You should discuss with your advisor how much you should sell based on your specific tax liability, other assets and income streams, and more. Two, since you're still working, this gives you the flexibility to take no cash flow and invest in other investments to diversify your portfolio without needing to sell and pay taxes on all those gains. Three, take some of your incoming cash and build a 1 to 2 year cushion in your checking account. If the market does crash, especially in the early stages of retirement when it can be most impactful, it will not hurt you if you take that precaution. There are other suggestions I can give based on your situation, but I would need to know more specific. Some people may suggest option strategies using margin and other more exotic approaches. This generally does not make sense for retail investors in your situation. It's far too complex, it's expensive to implement, and it won't adequately diversify your holdings. Okay, next question. There are frequent articles about how young people these days have been dealt a bad lot. Terrible job markets, tons of student debt, AI taking people's jobs, home ownership is unaffordable, and more. What are your thoughts on this set of economic circumstances, and what's your advice for young people trying to get ahead today? So, I don't mean to sound callous, but sometimes in life you need to suck it up, stop fetching, and keep on keeping on. Young people have not been dealt a worse hand than previous generations. It's just a popular talking point by many news outlets and social media influencers. I imagine my family, I should say, is similar to many Jewish families in this country. So let's look at their set of circumstances. On my mother's side, my grandparents escaped war-torn Europe after seeing their families gassed in death camps. They had nothing, no money, no skills, very little, if any, family survived. On my father's side, my great grandfather was the only one of his family to get out of Russia, where the rest of his family were slaughtered in the pogroms. While the starting point for our family in this country was rough, there were also other speed bumps along the way, including discrimination, depressions, recessions, nuclear war threat, high and prolonged inflation, lost decades of stock market performance, and so on. Sorry to be harsh, but the truth is things are not worse today or for millennials in general than they were in the past. People always find things to complain about. You need to find a way to make it work. This may mean making adjustments to your lifestyle, housing arrangements, schooling options, career choices, and so forth. You'll make it work. You just need the right attitude and a bit of grit. This recipe for success will stand the test of time. Next question. My siblings inherit a multifamily unit in Brooklyn. I don't want to be in the real estate business and don't want to go into business with my siblings. The issue is my other siblings want to hold this property. They said it will be a great asset and the income stream is solid and rising. How do I handle this situation? It seems to be a very popular question. I receive some version of it on a somewhat regular basis. So you should ask them to buy you out. If it's such a good asset, they should be willing to pay a premium. Reality, they won't pay a premium because that's just the way life is. Maybe they'll surprise you. In the event they don't pay a premium or market rate for your promotion, take a discount to the market price to get bought out and move on with your life. You are right in not wanting to go into business with other family members, especially if it's a lot of them. There will inevitably be fights, unexpected expenses, and the returns won't be as attractive as they think. You will likely be better off financially if you get bought out, remove yourself from the situation, and invest in something that is sensible for your own personal situation, which likely differs from your siblings. The real estate ownership is a headache. Oftentimes doesn't work out, and going into business with family will amplify these concerns. And my bracha to you is that things should work out smoothly, speedily, and successfully for you and your family. Okay, that's it for financial questions this week. And by the way, if you have a more involved personal finance situation, feel free to reach out directly to me and perhaps my team and I can help you. The best way to get a hold of me is via email at jonathan@parkbridgewealth.com. And finally, I'd like to end with the timely and actionable idea that listeners can implement to their own financial lives. And today's timely idea is that Trump accounts are now live. For those who don't know, this summer, something remarkable happened in the world of family finance. The federal government started depositing real money into children's investment accounts, not a credit, not a deduction, actual dollars. If your child is born after January 1st, 2025, you can claim a $1,000 federal deposit. Twins means $2,000. More children before 2028 could mean thousands in free seed money. These new Section 538 Trump accounts launched July 4th, 2026, and millions have already been opened. Think of them as a retirement accounts that start at birth. Any child under 18 with a Social Security number qualifies. The funds must be invested in low-cost U.S. equity index funds, and the account converts into traditional IRA when the child turns 18. Here's the action item. Check your eligibility immediately. The federal deposit is not automatic. You must file IRS Form 4547 through the Trump Accounts portal, the IRS account, online account, the official app, or by mail. There are two more funding sources families should know about. First, the Dell Foundation is offering $250 for children born between 2016 and 2024 based on zip code, and funding is first come, first served. Second, some employers can contribute up to $2,500 per child per year, tax-free to the employee. The long-term potential is enormous. Consistent contributions, not the initial $1,000, drive growth. Maxing out the account for 18 years could reach roughly 200 grand by adulthood, and compounding over a lifetime can push that into the seven-figure range. Bottom line, if you have children born between 2025 and 2028, act now. Claim the federal deposit, check Dell eligibility, and ask your employer about contributions. This is one of the most meaningful new savings tools families have seen in decades. And with that, it's a wrap for this week's show. Any comments or questions, feel free to reach out directly to me via email. I love hearing from my listeners. And finally, the secret to financial success is no secret at all. It's to spend less than you make, invest the difference prudently, and ignore all the noise. See you next time on Jonathan on Money.